Okay, so today's topic is CDI Advanced. So let's move on to the presentation. So the topics that we are going to cover in CDI Advanced session today include producer method, event handling, alternatives, interceptor, and decorator, and stereotype. After CDI Basics last week, some of you, in fact, might want to ask, what is the real advantages of CDI over, other dependence injection schemes? And two major themes we talked about last week was loose coupling and type-based dependence injection. And you're going to see those examples in today's presentation. In fact, what you see today, what you're going to learn today, in fact, actually really present the advantages of using CDI as a standard-based and a lot richer type-based dependence injection schemes compared to other alternatives. So let's start with the producer. So producer method, which is represented by @produces annotation, basically lets you create dependency object yourself. Okay. In previous session last week, basically you asked the container to create an object for you, meaning container will search the class path and find out any object instance, any actually class that actually meet your type requirement, and then it will create an instance of it for you. Here you can use produces annotation to control the production of these dependency objects. By using produces annotation and by actually creating your own objects, you have several the advantages. For example, runtime polymorphism. You can actually use a business logic or time of the day or whatever to produce this dependency injection yourself. You can create this object, which could be non-bean instance. So objects to be injected are not required to be instance of the beans. You can also actually create an object instance based on some setup. Okay, so object requires some custom initialization, and this is something that you can do in your setup method when you're producing a dependency object. By using produces annotation, it basically enables the decoupling of producer from consumer of dependency object. I'm going to actually emphasize this aspect a couple of times using an example, but basically what it means is that the consumer of the dependency object does not care and does not need to know how the object gets created. It could be created by a container, or it could be created by producer. The producer method also enables type-safe programming model for injecting Java EE resources. I'm going to explain this concept later using an example code. All right, so this is an example of creating dependency object instance based on business logic. So here, what you're saying is this is a consumer, meaning this consumer asks, I want a coder who's also a chosen the qualifier type. So basically it's asking not just regular code object, but chosen and combined with the coder type object. Okay. Now, this is a consumer, and consumer doesn't need to know and doesn't care how this chosen coder type object gets created. Now, if there is a method that is annotated with the produces, and then this produces method, in this case getCoder, will be used to create an object instance of the type of chosen and coder combination. Okay, so in this case, it will actually depend. It will actually create an object instance. Well, in this case, these two objects is actually received as an argument. Okay. By the way, this @new means object instance of this one will be created by the container. So you have test code impl object and code impl object, and depending on the business logic, in this case, the coder type is either indicating that you want this or this. And so depending on the code type, a different object instance will be returned and produced. Okay, and so in this case, depending on this logic, the coder variable will be set either an object instance of this or this. So this is runtime polymorphism. Creation of non-bean instance is, this is an example. So here, let's say you want to have an object instance of faces context. So this is a consumer. So consumer says, give me faces context object. Okay. And if there is a method, if there is a producer method that is annotated with produces. By the way, whenever I say producer method, I meant a method. I meant the method that is annotated with the produces. Okay. So container finds that there is in fact the producer method, okay, that returns faces context object. So this face context object, and here this is an example. In fact, you can actually here this is a business. This could be a business logic, okay. And here we just create an instance of faces context object and X returns, and the consumer will be injected with it. Okay, so this business logic could be something different. You could in fact have a factory class that actually create the faces context object for using whatever means. Disposes annotation is used to clean up whatever the object that was produced. So it's used to dispose of object that is produced and need to be explicitly destroyed. For example, suppose if JDBC connection object was created through produces method. So here, let's say we have, there is a consumer that wants JDBC connection object. In that case, the container will first check whether there is a producer method that uses the produces, and here connection object is created and returned. Later on, you could have a method includes a logic of closing it, and here if you say at disposes and that connection object that was actually produced here, and this method will be automatically invoked and to perform the cleanup. Okay, so let's do our first exercise. So we're going to take a look at the lab documentation. Those of you who have an access to hands-on labs, feel free to try things along with me. Okay, so we're going to do exercise 1. Okay, so we're going to actually just these two, the producer methods example 1 and producer method example 2. Okay. These are all Maven projects, so you can use any IDE of your choice. Documentation is created using Eclipse IDE. Today, I'm going to just use the NetBeans to run the code. Okay. All right, so we are going to try this. So I'm going to just run the application, and then we'll analyze the code. So I'm running over Glassfish. So this is the result. It's basically saying greeting produces good morning. You will see the code later on. Depending on what time of the day it is, it's going to actually produce either good morning string object or good afternoon string object or good evening string object. Because this is morning in Boston, it actually produces good morning string object. This is a max number produced 100 and random number produces 56. Okay, so let's see the code. I'm going to actually use the lab documentation because it highlighted key important point. Okay, so first of all, we have to, so we have defined, in fact, 3 the qualifier type. Okay, actually, I'm going to actually show you the consumer code first. Okay, so the consumer code is hello servlet Java file, and here is injected with 3 different object instances. One is greeting message, is string type, and annotated with the formal qualifier. So what it means is that I'm asking the container to find a way to create and produce, find a way to inject an object of this type, formal and string type. Okay, meaning I do not want just a regular string object instance. I want the combination of formal and string type object. Same thing here. So this is a combination of a max number qualifier type plus int type. Okay, so I'm asking container to produce or create whatever using whatever means it has to inject this max number qualifier type plus this int type. Okay, same thing with this random number. So this is the user, meaning this is a consumer of this dependency injection object. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the qualifier type or format first. All right, so as we have learned last week, the way that you are going to create the qualifier type is using @qualifier annotation with formal, with the @interface. Basically, we are creating an annotation, okay, defining an annotation. So we define the formal qualifier type, okay, and this is the producer method. So it says I am creating, so this method is a producer method. This method is not just creating regular string object instance, it's creating formal qualifier type plus string type object. Okay, so whenever the qualifier annotation is used, you can think of this is extended Java type. Okay, it's not just regular string object type, but formal string object type. Okay, and it produces with this method is actually annotated with the produces the annotation. So this is a producer method of an object instance of this combination, formal and string type. And as you can see, depending on time of the day, it will return different string object. Okay, so if it is in the morning, it will return the good morning and good afternoon or good evening. Okay, so just make sure that I'm not, so I'm going to just change to this one 10. In that case, let's just change the code. So producer formal here. So here, I'm going to just change this one. Good morning, Boston. Okay, save the change. Okay, so you can see different string object is actually returned. Okay, so let's actually try the second example. So let's run this code first. Okay, so this is a string encoder, the example. Okay, again, depending on the logic, so depending on what user has chosen, user can actually choose test encoder or shift letters encoder. So this is the real business logic that you want to choose, and this is the test case. Okay, so if you choose shift letters, real business logic implementation of the string encoder, and if I say A and shift by 2, you're going to see C. Okay, if you say B and 2, then it's going to return D, something like that. Now, if you choose test, okay, and encode, then it's going to display the thing string object that gets returned from test implementation object of this code. Okay, so it says string input string is B and shift value is 2. So let's see the code. This is what we just have done. So this is index.html file that gets displayed when you run the application. So as you can see, the value you chose, okay, so that's the selection, item that you chose will be captured as a coder bean, bean object, and the coder type field, okay. So that's either test or the test or shift letters. Okay. So this is the producer coder bean. Again, you can see it's named as a coder bean. So that's the reason, when you actually see when you use the coder bean index the facelet here, it will use this bean class, okay, because that is the named the bean. Now, in this code, what you see is that, this code is saying that give me, inject a coder object, but not just regular coder object, but chosen coder object. So again, you can think of the combination of this chosen qualifier type and coder, the Java type, as the extended. The type is asking the container to find and create and inject. Okay. Now the container will check whether there is in fact a producer method for creating this, this object, and it finds produces method here. So you can see we have a getCoder method, okay, which receive these two object instance, and depending on this coder type, again, you can see the coder type that you have seen here, Okay, so that will be either the test or shift. Okay, so depending on which one that is chosen by the user, different object instance, test coder impl object or code impl object, both of these are in fact a coder type, will be returned. Okay. All right, so and you can see this is the code impl, which is a coder type, and the test code impl is also a coder type. Okay. All right, so that's what we've done. Let's do some experimentation. Suppose we are going to change this producer coder bin here. What we are going to do is we are going to comment this out, okay, and see what happens. So here, basically, I comment out at chosen the qualifier. What it means is that this get coder producer method will generate a coder object of just the coder type. It's not generating a chosen coder type, but just coder type. However, here you are asking not just regular coder type, but also at chosen coder type. Okay, so in this case, you will experience unsatisfied dependency injection because the consumer asking for the type of chosen and coder, but this producer will actually generate only the coder. Okay, so let's run this code. All right, so here, let's take a look at the errors. So here we have an exception. So you can see it has unsatisfied dependent, okay, because what was asked was not found, okay. All right. So hopefully you can see now let's actually try another experimentation. Suppose if I comment out this one as well, okay. In this case, what will happen is ambiguity error, okay, because there are actually two. Well, so the consumer asks just a coder type, right? But there are two coder type object instance, this one and this one. So in this case, it will have the ambiguity exception error because container doesn't know which one to return. Okay, so let's try that. So here you will see ambiguous dependencies, okay, of type coder because there are two different possibilities of the coder object. Okay, so let me just clean this up and save it. And if you try again, then it should work okay. So A, and this time we'll say 3, and then encode. Then it will D, and if I say test, encode, then it will use testing logic. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next. Type safe usage of Java EE resource is also possible using producer method. Okay, so this is an example. Suppose you want to have entity manager object. So typically the way that you are going to create an entity manager object is by using persistent context annotation, providing persistent unit. Well, if you have only one persistent unit, then you don't have to specify it, but it's possible a single application could have a multiple persistent unit. In that case, you have to specify it. Now, if you're not using the scheme that we are actually introducing here, produces the scheme, what you do is that you might in fact have this line of code in multiple locations of your application. Okay, and that's very fragile because this is actually based on the string name, right? So even if you actually mistype string name, you are not going to actually find that problem during compile time, but you're going to actually find that out during runtime, which is really bad. Okay, you do not want that kind of problem in production environment, right? So what you can do is you can actually create the entity manager of user database type. So here you are basically producing an entity manager object of this type. And first of all, you're going to actually define the qualifier, user database. So what we are doing is that we are going to create just once somewhere. So we are actually producing entity manager object, okay, which is also type of user database. Okay, so you do this one once, and then in the real many locations that you need to have that entity manager object, you are going to inject entity manager specifying that the qualifier. Okay, so in here, what you're saying is, I'm not asking just regular entity manager, but I'm asking user database plus entity manager type of object. Okay, so in that case, it will find, from here, because it, the container actually finds that, this is the entity manager that gets actually created and returned as the type of user database plus entity manager object type. Okay. All right, so let's do that exercise. That's exercise 3. Okay. First of all, we want to make sure the Java database is up and running. Okay, because we are going to, it's up and running. Okay, so let's run that application. So that is database DB. Okay, so I'm going to run it. So basically, we are going to add a record into a table, like a to-do table, a couple of times. So type a string, something you want to do. So learn Java EE6, submit. And then we're going to actually submit the second one, learn to stream, and submit. And then if you take a look at the items, then you can see these 2 items have been in fact created and entered into the database. So if I take a look at the database, so I'm going to just go to connect. And there should be a to-do database. Fish. Oh, maybe this is the one. Okay, connect. Yeah, to do. This is the database. So if I see the data, you can see, this is created, learn Java E6 and learn to swim, and this is the date and time, the October 24th and 11:22. All right, so let's see the code. So we did this. Yeah, I'm gonna actually go. We did this. Yeah, so this is the one I'm actually looking for. So we just go to this one. So we just try this, right? And you can see 2 entries, 2 records have been created in the database. Okay. All right. So first of all, we have to define the user database qualifier type. Okay. So just regular qualifier type. And then, as I said